Recording in progress.
Well, welcome everybody to the ABA Engineering Academy's broadcast engineering webinar. We missed the one last month because of some scheduling problems, but I think we got all our scheduling problems and even got to the point where we have our co-host, John George. George, welcome to the show today.
Well, thank you very much. It's good to be here.
Do you have any words of wisdom for us before we get started?
Well, I think my words of wisdom would, of course, be back to EAS. I seem to be hung up on that on every meeting, but and doing a lot of ABIP inspections around the country. I know that Larry and I have both seen a lot of record-keeping issues, so we certainly want to remind everybody to be certain that you're receiving each week your CAP test, as well as your test from the LP1 and LP2. And that you're sending a test each week, and that would be on both your main channel, and for radio, your HD 2, 3, and 4 channels, and for television, your dot 2, 3, and 4 channels as well. Also, an update, I know a lot of people are asking about the software upgrades that the units are requiring to be completed by December. Latest we have from Sage is they're now saying it'll probably be late summer, but I would still try to get my orders in immediately and determine, especially if you have one of the DASDAC units, if your unit is capable of handling the new software. They work very closely with you to ensure that, but you do not want to wait till October or November to be dealing with it, because it will probably be a mad rush at the last minute and there will be delays. So those are my words of wisdom from EAS today. Larry?
Okay. Well, along the same line is we need to really make sure that stations are aware that they have to have the most current version of software running now before they can upload the new software. So you and I both are running to that.
Exactly.
So make sure you contact your chairman of the SECC in your state, or your vendor or your manufacturer, to find out what you're supposed to be running now, so you can upload when the new one comes out. Our program, as normally, is underwritten by the Max Connect group. And they are a full service engineering department. They have sales and service. They sell everything, I think, from microphones all the way to antennas, and they do installs and repairs. So if you get a chance and you need something in that line, make sure that you give them a call or visit the website. It's just maxconnect.com. So give them a call and check it out for you. We're very happy to have with us today some gentlemen that from the Society of Broadcast Engineers, Jim Ragsdale, who is Executive Director, and Chris Scherer. Chris, I think, does just about everything else that Jim doesn't do, including taking out the trash when the at the end of the evening. I think that's probably
I'm just a bouncer.
Is that it? All right, I'm going to turn the program over to you guys, and let me get off the slides here, and we'll talk about SBE, and I guess initially, Jim and Chris, maybe a little history of how it actually got started back many years ago.
Well, Jim, you want me to take that one?
Yeah, you've got more history here than I do.
Sure. Well, the SBE actually traces its roots back to 1961. And it starts out, of course, with controversy like anything else. There was the Institute of Radio Engineers and the American Institute of Electrical Engineers, and they were going to merge together. They eventually did in 1963 and became the group we know today as the IEEE. There was concern, though, that that group was not going to address the needs of the station level broadcast engineers. It was only going to be the high level stuff. So some of you may remember the name John Battison at the time. He was the editor of Broadcast Engineering magazine for a period. And he had that concern, so he penned an editorial in the April, or it was like 61, 63, somewhere in that neighborhood. I've forgotten the year now, but he penned an editorial basically saying, I think we need another organization that'll address the concerns of the station level guys. Ran application forms in broadcast engineering, and by 1964 they got together. I had to look this up to make sure I got it right. Then an organizational meeting was held at the NAB convention at the Conrad Hilton Hotel in Chicago. And 100 people showed up and said, yeah, we like this idea a lot. The initial name of the group was going to be the Institute of Broadcast Engineers, but there was concern that IBE was too close to IBEW. So instead of IBE, they swapped the I for an S and became the Society of Broadcast Engineers. So the first meeting was 1964, and by a year later, it was up and running fully, operating out of John Battison's kitchen and his kitchen table. And here we are today with 115 chapters, members in all 50 states, several U.S. territories, 25 other countries, including our newest chapter, 148 in Eastern Europe, sort of centered around Tbilisi and the Republic of Georgia.
Boy, that would take a big kitchen to have that meeting, wouldn't it? So, Jim, you've been with the organization for some time now, and what do you see is the biggest thing that draws people to the SBE?
Well, it's definitely I'll use the term brotherhood over, although it includes women as well. But the thing that I've sensed in talking to members is that there's a lot of community that is developed in local chapters and at national meetings. Those of you who have worked together and know each other for years, and you help each other out no matter where you're at. It doesn't matter if it's a competing station, your resources for each other. And so I've just seen a lot of that in the 3 years that I've been a part of SBE. I always tell people that I get to work with the smart people in the room. I just run an office, but you all do the complex work in the stations, and you're the first responders for broadcasting in emergencies. And you, the thing that I've noticed about our membership is that everyone seems to want to participate in each other's success. So education and certification are the sweet spot that SBE occupies, developing certifications so that you can show your expertise in different areas of broadcast engineering, but also that you are willing to invest the knowledge that you've gained. You'll pass that on to other people. So, the education committee is a great example of that. Folks who work in engineering know what the needs of member engineers are, and then work to find a subject matter expert that can provide that knowledge that's needed by our members.
Well, one of the things that I have always been real pushing with everybody is that because the technology is changing at such a tremendous rate, and because I got started back in the early days, back in the 60s, but even at that, even those days, things were changing. But now the rate of change is so fast that the engineer or the person working in whatever chosen field, in our field would obviously the broadcast engineering field, if you don't stay up, if you don't keep up with what's going on, you'll be out of date. It almost seems like within almost a week. There's just something new coming up in the trade just every day. And it's impossible if you don't keep up, then you're going to be behind real quick. And that's what I've seen with the SBE. It has so many services, and we'll talk about the services here in just a little bit. But that's one of the main things I think about the SBE is helping an engineer, as a term I like to use, become a lifelong learner. And I think there's a lot of services that you guys offer to help engineers in that light.
Yeah, and we just did a membership survey at the end of last year and got great response from our members. But one of the things that I think many of them said was, I used, the SBE provides that lifelong learning opportunity for me. And it's doesn't cost me a whole lot, but it just provides an unlimited resource of what's developing, what just developed this week or next week, what's in process. And I think you're right, Larry.
I think networking too is a real big plus, as you mentioned a while ago, in that when you get together with other engineers, whether it's either at your local chapter or at a national convention or something like that, networking with other engineers, you can pick up a lot of information. And I know that happens at our local chapter here in Montgomery. We're always sitting around talking technical stuff while we're eating. But networking is a big plus, and conventions are good for that because you get to see people from all over and I know my experience of the SBE, because I've been in the organization for a number of years, and that's what I really enjoyed about going to the conventions and meetings like that was meeting new people and find out that even the people in my little hometown of Enterprise, Alabama, working in radio, the people in New York, the engineers up there, did the same thing I did. It just cost a little more to do it in New York. So the networking, and you might want to talk about the network aspect of the SBE.
Yeah.
Chris, your thoughts on that? Or?
Well, Chris mentioned the 115 chapters across the U.S. and those outside of the U.S. And definitely that it is a challenge and was a challenge the last few years to try to keep those local chapters meeting and getting together. But I think a lot of them now have been able to kind of get things started again. And the opportunity to meet, I've gotten invited to several of those chapter meetings that are happening hybrid, using Zoom or whatever else. And I see those members who have known each other for years and years and are still sharing knowledge with each other about challenges that they're facing. So I think that I can't think of a member I've talked to who hasn't said, I had somebody who was a mentor to me when I was just new to the industry, who I could call in the middle of the night or on a weekend and say, I've got this problem going on. Do you have any ideas? And, they'd solve problems on the spot. And a few of them said, hey, I'll be right over. I'll jump in the car and be there in just 30 minutes and we'll solve this problem together. So I think that networking does happen all the time. Even the folks who are not working in a station but work for a vendor are just so helpful. The broadcast engineers that I see that work for different companies are willing to do whatever it takes to help that local broadcast engineer get their station up if they've gone down or whatever it is. So
there's really no competition between engineers. I know that management and sales department sometimes they look at competition different than engineers. And I recall a personal situation here one time when one of our heavy competition competitors actually lost their antenna, burn up, and the engineer, and we had a master antenna that we were working on, and the engineer called and said, if I bring a little kilowatt transmitter over tonight and with a little filter, can I get in your wideband port? I said, oh, sure, no problem. He said, don't you need to run it by your manager? I said, well, I'll tell him what we're going to do. But I said, he doesn't really care. So I walked in and told the manager, and he said, sure, we're competitors out on the street, but we want to help each other out. So engineers, though, work hand in hand. And sometimes you may lose an exciter and the guy across town's got a spare one and he'll bring it over to you. So that's really the way it works. Chris, why don't you take a moment and talk about some of the services that the SBE offers? I know there's a whole bunch of services that the SBE has to offer.
Sure. Actually, I was going to just, if I could expound a little bit, I think what you hit on, Larry, with the professional networking, I mean, that's the key of any professional society, really. That's probably one of the biggest assets of being a member is access to other members. And your story about helping the others in town. I think just about every station in any market could say, I wouldn't be on the air if it weren't for WXYZ helping me out the other day. There's a lot of behind the scenes sharing, not giving away trade secrets, obviously, but certainly helping each other along the way. And we're all in this together. So competition, co-opetition helps everyone. So anyway, your question was about services and whatnot. The SBE often has been referred to as sort of a three-legged stool, and those legs have changed a little bit over time. Probably some of the most, the three most, I guess, I don't want to say important because I don't want to rank them in any way, but more visible perhaps. Certainly our certification program. The SBE certification program has been around since 1975. It started out as a result of the FCC doing away gradually with individual licensing. It's funny, the certification started as an effort to keep the FCC in the licensing business. And when it was discovered that they just didn't really have a taste, the FCC, the SBE stepped in and changed its tune and said, well, let's take it over, basically. So while certification isn't required to work in the business, it's a benchmark of your skill and your expertise and experience, and it shows others that you know what you're doing. We can't say it'll earn you more money, but we do have surveys that show those who are SBE certified tend to make more than those who are not SBE certified. So take that as you will, but I think it also shows sort of taking an active personal interest in your own career to obtain and maintain your certification. Side note, SBE certification, if those who don't know, it is not lifetime like FCC licenses were and are. They're valid for 5 years. Why do you have to renew? Because as you said at the top, technology changes. If I got my SBE certification in 1987 or whenever I got it, 89, I have to think of the year there. I'm not splicing a lot of 1/4-inch tape these days, or lining cart heads and worrying about azimuth and zenith and all that stuff. That's one element that obviously changed very, very quickly. So you renew every 5 years, and it can be a simple process. You can maintain your certification by earning points. And frankly, I don't think it's that hard to earn points. Just being active in your career, they can accumulate rather quickly. Or you can elevate to a next level, but we can get into some specifics on certification later. Another one of the legs would be education. And the SBE has always been involved in the education process, especially earlier on with the Ennis Educational Foundation, which is still active, but certainly more directly on the SBE side through our education committee. We offer at least 2 online webinars a month. We offer Ennis workshops, which take place all around the country, usually through local chapters and or state broadcast associations. The SBE University is out there. About a little over a year ago, we started the Technical Professional Training Program, which ties a lot of the educational opportunities into one package for new members to join the SBE and kind of fast track their careers in broadcasting. And that's our education side. The third leg has kind of modified and a little bit over the years, but I think member services is probably the umbrella. That includes frequency coordination, includes some of the professional networking you've mentioned, jobs online, resume service, our annual compensation survey. There are just many things that fall under that umbrella to sort of form the 3 foundational legs, or the strongest legs of the society that we know today.
The certification, I think, is one of the prime, probably the big plus for the SBE. And as you know, I've been involved in it as well on the committee. The ABA Engineering Academy, when that actually started, it sort of started sort of funny in that we had a board meeting with the ABA members, and there was some comment by one of the general managers of a TV station, I think, and he asked the question was, we're trying to find engineers, and it's hard to find engineers. Is there a school that we can go and recruit from? And I answered, I said, well, not like there used to be. There used to be a bunch of technical schools. A lot of colleges have broadcast courses, but they're primarily in the production side. And they don't really teach the technical side. So they looked at me and said, can we start our own? I said, what is this we stuff? You're all staring at me. So what we did was, as a member of the certification committee, I got with everybody at the committee at one of the meetings out at Las Vegas and talked about it. And we actually created the ABA Engineering Academy based around the certification program. And as a result, our classes are 5 days. And the fifth day, which is on Friday, we are very honored to proctor exams, SBE exams, if anybody wants to take them. And over the years that we've been doing this, we've had a lot of people take exams, and a lot of them passed and joined up to the SBE. So we've really enjoyed the partnership with the SBE in doing that. The study guides that we use are actually based on the certification program, and we cover all the subjects, not the actual questions, because I'm not privy to the questions on the test either, but we just try to cover all the subjects that are included in that. So I think the certification program has been a real big plus for the SBE over the years. Do you have any numbers about how many members are actually certified?
I don't have that handy, and that's a question we get asked, and it kind of gets convoluted a little bit because some people hold multiple certifications, so we have to kind of go an extra step in the filter. Like Wayne Pacina's online, and he only holds, 57 certifications or something. We don't have that many, but he holds, I think, every single one he possibly can. I didn't grab that number. I'm sure it's available, but with some 4,500 members currently in the society, I wouldn't be surprised if it's well over half, if not 2/3 are certified. Again, I'm pulling that out of the air, so don't hold me to that number, but we could probably get that if you're really interested.
I just saw something pop up on the chat thing about the SBE, the certification program actually has some cert previews, and I understand they're in the process, I think, of being updated. And he asked about that.
You are correct. Currently, Cert Preview is a software package. You have to install it. It's a one-off as far as per machine registration. We are working on a system that is more web-based, which allows a couple of things. It allows you to register once and use it in several places, but it also gives us basically instant access to the sample question pool database. In the past, if you downloaded it, obviously you have what you have, and if there's an update, how do you do that? Granted, we hope you're going to get Cert Preview, prepare, and then take the exam, and not buy Cert Preview and then 10 years later decide to take the exam. But it does give us a chance to update it more on the fly, if you will. I do not have a final date on that. I know it was hoped to get that done by this year. And I'm involved in it on the periphery as sort of a liaison on the project, but not directly. So I know a little bit about what's happening, but I think the plan right now is that by the end of the year it will be available.
Yeah, that'll be good when it gets updated and have it electronically. So like you say, it can be updated as new technology comes out. Our study guides that we use here at the Academy, they started out just a few pages. It was a real small study guide. And now it's it's in an inch or inch and a half binder. And we keep adding. And my wife helps me put them together every year for the classes. And she said, when are you going to stop adding pages to this thing? I said, when technology stops
Never
changing.
is the answer. Yeah,
That's
really.
right. We touch on the different levels of certification, if you will.
Sure. There are a few different areas of certification. There's what I like to call the core four. of levels, which would be broadcast technologist, broadcast engineer, senior engineer, and professional engineer. And I'm abbreviating those because there's a radio or a TV element involved. But those are basically the core four, and that's kind of where the program started. The technologist is the entry level. It does not require any experience requirement at all. In fact, if you hold an FCC general, is it?
I think it's extra.
Extra, thank you. I haven't had to do it in a while, so I have to think about that. You can actually apply to get the certification through license, which means you don't have to take the test. But all the other levels, well, I say all the others, the broadcast, the radio, certified broadcast radio engineer and certified broadcast television engineer, and the certified senior radio engineer and certified senior television engineer both require an exam. Why do you have to take a test if you've been in the industry for 100 years and you know everything? Well, that's great. We like to take your word for it, but it's 50 questions, and let's just make sure we all are on the same page. So you can usually do them, I think, in less than an hour. You get up to 3 hours to take an exam, but typically I found people take about an hour just to go through and verify everything. The senior levels also have an essay question. It's a written out, and you actually get, except on the specialists on the CSRE, CSTE, you get 3 exam questions or 3 essay questions, and you get to pick one that you're most comfortable with to answer. Then it's all graded, and you get a score of pass fail. And if you pass, congratulations. And if you don't pass, you can take it again at the next exam window. So I also mentioned professional, the certified professional broadcast engineer. There is no exam for that, but you must hold senior engineering certification first. And then after 20 years of experience, you can apply for your CPBE with some letters of recommendation. So that's the one that doesn't have an exam involved, but indirectly, obviously. I mentioned service requirements. For the broadcast engineer, it's 5 years. For the senior engineer, it's 10 years. For a professional engineer, it's 20. On the broadcast engineer and senior engineer, college credit or college time counts in that window. So if you went to college for 4 years and you worked in the industry for 1, congratulations, you're eligible to take your certified broadcast radio engineer exam. We do not count college experience on the professional side. That has to be purely workplace oriented. So that's maybe a bit of a long-winded look at what I call the core 4. Add to that 2 other sort of entry levels. We do have operator level exams. Think radio board op or TV master control, the certified radio operator, certified television operator. Those exams are a little different too. They are the only 2 exams that actually have a book that go along with them. Basically you read the book and then you can apply to take the exam through proctored situation, whether it's an employee or a librarian, commanding officer, pastor, or somebody like that. But it's also 50 questions, multiple choice. That is closed book. I didn't mention on the others, the exams for the multiple choice question portion is open book. So bring any references you like. We think it's just as important that you are able to find the answer as if you know the answer. And some of the questions are not exactly, what color is the sky? Blue, straight obvious. It's a matter of presenting some information and arriving at a conclusion, which again, the experience falls into. We do have 2 that are in the broadcast networking side of thing, as in IT, the certified broadcast networking technologist and the certified broadcast networking engineer. CBNT is no work experience. CBNE is 5 years. And Larry, if I get these wrong, please correct me because you know them as well as I do, I think. But again, I'm not the certification director, so I'm a little bit removed sometimes. But those focus on the IT side of the broadcast environment. So no RF. There could be some FCC related elements, but very little, if any, as I recall. Then we have what we call specialist certifications. And some people kind of think of them as the old endorsement in the FCC world. Yeah, it kind of is. But to hold a specialist, you have to hold a host certification first. And that would be broadcast engineer or senior engineer level. And those currently 4 specialist certifications. There's one for 8 VSB, one for AM directionals, one for ATSC3, and one for digital radio. HD radio. Shh. We don't use the brand name though. So those 4, again, you just have to hold a host certification, and then you can take the specialist certification to sort of add on top of what you already have in the certification program. So, and like I said, you can hold more than one. Obviously, a specialist can be on top of a host, but there are people who CBT is one exam, but when you go to broadcast engineer and senior, it splits into radio and TV. We've had people who hold broadcast radio engineer and broadcast television engineer, or senior radio and broadcast television, or something like that. So they may hold 2 at the same time. When you get to professional, it kind of supersedes it all, and you're back to 1 with whatever specialists you may have added to that at that time.
You touched on one thing that I think is very important, and that is that it is open book. And the reason I like that is, as compared to the old FCC exams, which a lot of us had to take years ago, it was all had to be up here.
Mm-hmm.
And now when you're working at a facility and something goes wrong or you need some information, there's tons of reference material. And now there's Google and everything else
Sure.
that you can go. So you don't have to actually have it all up in your head.
And a lot of us do, obviously, keep it in our heads. We have a lot of things that we can just do and we don't even have to think about. But you're exactly right. There's always the situation where you're faced with a problem and it's new, or it's different, or you've tried all the usual steps and you still don't have a solution. So yeah, where do you turn? Where do we all turn? And we used to turn to reference books a lot. Now we turn to, like you said, to the internet and start doing searches. But like I said, being able to find the answer is just as important as directly knowing the answer.
That's true. Jim, talk a little bit, if you will, about, I think the name of the organization actually didn't change, but it was added to. There's another part of the Society of Broadcast Engineers. Talk about that, if you will, just a little.
Yeah, we definitely, and I think the industry realized a few years back that the skill set was not strictly just in the station, the broadcast station, but that there were people who were doing other parts of that skill set in other related industries. So they added on, as you said, we went from being the Society of Broadcast Engineers to being the Society of Broadcast Engineers and Multimedia Professionals. I think I got that right, Chris.
Yeah, our tagline, the Association for Broadcast and Multimedia Technology Professionals, right?
Yeah. So, I think we're working real hard to identify people who fall into that kind of second group, who have a strong affinity for the broadcast world, but their actual work assignments may be more narrow in focus. And we want to welcome them into the SBE as well, and we want to learn from them and have them learn from others. So trying to broaden that window a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, because I learned early on when we started the academy that one of my things that I do, not as a sideline, but as along with broadcasting, is I've been involved in live audio, mixing live audio at concerts or churches or in a recording studio. And I was rather surprised initially when we started talking about that, how many broadcast engineers actually have a hand in that side of the industry as well. And so we actually added on to the academy where we do a live audio seminars specifically for churches. We'll go around to churches and get their sound crews together, because as most people know, the volunteers at a church are strictly volunteers, and they may be cab drivers during the week or carpenters or whatever. And the sort of joke is that on Volunteer Sunday, the pastor gets up and says, this is Volunteer Sunday. We need someone to help park cars. We need somebody to help pass out bulletins. Oh, we need somebody to help with the sound. And some guy in the back says, boy, that would be interesting. I'd like to do that, but I don't know anything about it. And he says, don't worry, we'll teach you. Well, that stops right there. So it never goes any further. So we began to do these seminars at various churches, and we call it the art of mixing live audio. And the key that we always start out with at a church service is, remember, you're not mixing a Metallica concert. You're mixing a church service. So so we've added that to our repertoire, and I was real pleased when I saw that the SBE decided to include that group as well, because there is a lot of people that are involved in pro audio, and that's a good thing to do, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, we did focus groups following up on our member survey this last year, and some of those folks, that's exactly what they do. They're a professional broadcast engineer, but on the side, they run sound for this or that, or video, or they help install equipment, and so they have an expertise that goes way beyond just what they're doing in the control room at the studio, and we want to support that and provide education that helps those people do what they do.
But some of that they do in the pro audio field actually relates into what they do in their broadcast station. As Chris knows, on one of our seminars, we had a good friend of mine and Chris, Andrew Shep, on with us. And the reason, he's a Grammy-winning mix engineer, now lives in London, I think. And the first time I heard him speak, he was talking about how he sets up to begin a mix session. And as I listened to him, I said, well, duh, that's the same thing the guy does sitting in the production room cutting a commercial for the car dealership. So we had him on our program to talk about that. So I think the two sort of mesh together.
Yeah.
Yep.
Another thing that meshes together, and Chris touched on this a while ago when he was talking about the IT part of it, over the years, as all of us on the call knows, that early in the broadcasting business, there was no IT. It was strictly audio and RF. But then as computers came into being and IT became a portion, what happened in the larger markets was you had the broadcast engineer on this side of the hall and the IT guy on this side of the hall. And I've always sort of said that the broadcaster knows what those black boxes do and how to fix them. He just doesn't know how to make them talk to each other. The guy on the other side of the hall, he doesn't know what they do or how to fix them. He just knows how to make box A talk to box B. Well, that's created a problem. And now it's sort of beginning to merge, it's quickly beginning to merge, since everything is IT. So the IT courses that you guys have for the certification I think is very important, because now a broadcast engineer has to know IT, and if an IT guy is moving over into broadcasting, he has to know that in. You don't want to turn loose a IT guy without any training in broadcasting, because you'll go to the transmitter and blow himself up. But so if you get them meshed together like that, so I think that's good that's coming about.
In fact, that's one of the latest webinar series. There's a 4-part series going on right now on webinars by SBE, RF for IT. First one is in the books and on demand. The second one is, I believe, this week later on.
Yeah.
So the other two are coming up, and then that's basically the basics. They're going to work on a second half of it, the more advanced side, another 4-parter, but that hasn't been put on the calendar yet. So yeah, it ties directly into what you just said.
Yeah, and the other thing that we've really tried to support that with is training about cybersecurity, because that's becoming a bigger and bigger issue in the station as well.
Wayne has done, and Wayne, you can comment on that if you like, but we've had Wayne down at a couple of our seminars talking about cybersecurity and what a big problem that is, and a difficult one to to get a handle on. And the stuff that Wayne does for y'all and for the other broadcasters around the country has been really knowledgeable, showing about things that you need to do to keep people from breaking into your system. Where do you see the SBE going in the future, Jim? Or what do y'all have on drawing board?
Yeah, it really is a part of this this survey and the focus groups that we were doing. That was all intended to feed our strategic planning process. And so I think one of the takeaways we've gotten from the focus groups is continuing to expand our education and certification into those areas that are more on we might call them the periphery of engineering, but they're not really. Like, as you said, many folks are running audio in a control room or in a recording studio or whatever, and we can provide training on the audio side, the audio engineering side, or on the video production, AOIP and video over IP are things that I think we're going to have to more directly target as far as certification. We've also talked about doing something that ST 2110 subject matter that we can provide some education along that way, and then perhaps a certification. So I think we're going to have to continue to look creatively at what's developing in the industry and figure out how we can support that with education and certification opportunities. What the other thing that Chris touched on is we have this new chapter in Eastern Europe, and I think we have opportunity to help support broadcast engineers who are working. They may be working in technologies that used to be very common in the U.S. and are less common in the U.S., but are being used heavily in other environments. And so we may have some educational opportunity that we can provide to folks outside of the U.S. One example that came up at the NAB was broadcast engineers from Mexico who were very interested in utilizing some of our educational content and translating it into Spanish so that it could be used in other settings there. So I think there are opportunities outside of the U.S. to support broadcast engineering and the all the peers that we have outside of our borders.
Well, what other countries is the SBE in besides the United States?
Well, as we said, we got a chapter now based, sort of headquartered in Tbilisi, Georgia, but they work with engineers in Armenia, Azerbaijan, Moldova, and some of the other surrounding countries in that area. We have a chapter in Hong Kong, both a regular chapter and a student chapter. We have members in Saipan and Guam and some other U.S. territories. But I also know we have members in other countries. They're just not affiliated directly with the chapter, obviously. Several across Europe, several in Mexico, South America.
Africa.
Africa, that's right, of course. So all around. Canada, got a good assortment of members up north of the border in Canada, too.
So it's pretty much all over the world.
Pretty much. Yeah, the core is U.S., obviously, since that's where we started. But yeah, there's a good bunch. Do you do certification tests for those in other countries, or? We do not. There are some who have taken them. I mean, I know some in Canada have taken our certification exams. A few Europeans. I don't know about anybody in Africa off the top of my head. One of the problems, of course, if there's any U.S. FCC element, they may be taking a total stab in the dark because it doesn't apply to them, of course. And actually, I completely forgot two certification levels, the certified audio engineer and certified video engineer levels, which are equivalent to the broadcast engineering level, but without the RF side. So there wouldn't necessarily be any FCC element in there. So outside the U.S., the CEA and CEV levels could certainly apply and probably not have the same legislative issue that may come up that might hurt somebody from potentially not passing.
Sure. The SBE also has an annual convention. And I think you have one coming up later this fall. Is that correct? You might talk about that a little bit.
Sure. It's late September. It'll be in Columbus, Ohio, held in conjunction with the Midwest Broadcast and Multimedia Technology Conference. Ohio Association of Broadcasters puts it on, although this year they're being helped by the associations in Indiana, Kentucky, and Michigan as well. Jim, you want to pick it up from there?
Yeah, sure. So we've been working with Chris Merritt, who's the executive director of the Ohio Association of Broadcasters. And we reached out to them to see whether they were interested in hosting our national meeting in the fall, and they were very interested in that. And so they had this convention that they've been holding for a number of years, but has grown to include other states participating in it. And so their conference is a one-day event with a lot of education content being provided. And then we're going to have our board meeting the night before in Columbus, and then we'll have our membership meeting, which everyone is invited to on the day of their conference. I think that's at 4:30, and then we have a reception, and an awards reception and awards dinner for those who have earned awards, and we want to recognize them in front of the group. So that's all happening in 2 days, September
27 and 28. 28 for the MBMTC and 27th for some of the SB events in advance. Yep.
Yeah.
I think it was held in conjunction with NAB. I think one year, wasn't it, when or it used to be during right after the pandemic or something, wasn't it all, everybody bunched their conventions together?
Yeah, well, we didn't the NAB do something in the fall that one year? Or did they cancel that? I don't remember. It's all a blur.
Canceled that. Yeah,
it's all a blur.
Okay. I knew there was something about that.
Yeah, we were going to do it at the NAB in the fall because they tried to postpone the convention by 5 or 6 months, and then ended up canceling it altogether. So yeah, we were going to do it out in Las Vegas, but again, everything got canceled, and we ended up. I think that was a completely virtual national meeting that year. We did sort of an interesting hybrid online thing. So, as we were all doing at the time.
Right. One thing that we didn't touch on that I think is very important is the connection that you have legally with the FCC. You have sort of a organization that works back and forth, or department that works back and forth with the commission on various items. That's correct, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you're referring to our Government Relations Committee,
right,
which years ago was called the FCC Liaison Committee, but then FCC was just one part. They started working with other groups, including the FAA and the NTIA. That, calling it the FCC Liaison Committee didn't make sense anymore because it had a broader scope or had more involvement. But yeah, the GRC is out there. It has a chairman who is one of our elected board members. The core membership of that group is the SBE Executive Committee, which is the 4 elected officers, the immediate past president, and 2 appointed directors off the board of directors. That way, we ensure anything that happens has direct board oversight, as opposed to a committee sort of hey, wait a minute, you can't go and negotiate on our behalf. We need to see this first. So there is some direct involvement. But yeah, FCC filings, very common. And actually, R.J. Russell, who is frequency coordination manager, is heavily involved in that as well, since he's got an eye on a lot of things FCC oriented. He'll bring some things to the attention. He'll often work on whatever filings are being prepared through our regulatory council at Brooks Pierce. And quite active. Always keeping an eye on what's happening because we want to make sure we protect the interests of broadcasters, whether it's encroachment on frequency bands, especially in broadcast auxiliary services, but in other areas too, even some that aren't directly broadcast but still could affect us.
Yeah, I think that's really important because we talk about that in the academy, that a lot of the stuff like that is not technically related, but it is related to the broadcasters. And like we cover, believe it or not, we covered the public file. A lot of stuff in the public file is non-technical,
Mm-hmm.
but I've always felt that the engineer needs to sort of understand how the other departments in the station works and operates as far as filings and things like that, and different rules like that. So we sort of cover that, and that's sort of what y'all do as well. It's to sort of make a link between the technical and the legal part.
Mm-hmm.
We have a question came up. I see somebody said, is the CSRE exam specific to radio or TV, or are they for both? Or
Well, the R in CSRE stands for radio. So yes, Certified
Oh,
Senior Radio
the R.
Engineer. If you're a TV guy, you probably want to take the CSTE, Certified Senior Television Engineer, or Certified Broadcast Television Engineer. So
and let's see, I think we covered all the questions on the chat here. When if somebody, what is the best way for somebody to get involved in the SBE? If I guess first of all to try to find if there's a local chapter in their area, but if not, is there a way they can go to the SBE and get involved?
sure.
How does that work?
As far as finding a chapter, go to the website, sbe.org. Under, I have to get to a page, chapters, find a chapter. And we have a couple ways. You can do it by number, by state. I even put together a map. So if you don't want to sit there and try to whittle down, because some chapters have names that aren't quite so obvious, like pick one out of the air. Cleveland is Northeast Ohio. Okay, I could figure that out. Kansas City, pretty obvious. Some have names that are more geographic, and if you're not that familiar, you may not realize. So that's why I put the map together. You can quickly hone in and realize, oh, there's one that's only, technically 10 miles away from me. If you don't have a local chapter, you might feel that you're at a disadvantage, but honestly, with chapters meeting virtually so much anymore, you could be assigned any chapter you want. I mean, I live in Kansas City, but I could just as easily be in the Los Angeles chapter or the Cleveland chapter if that's what I chose to be a part of. So that's not a problem. And with a meeting virtually, many of them still meeting virtually, you can easily join in and hop on their calls. New York City chapter 15 is big on that. They've been promoting that quite a bit. That if you feel like you're a person without an island, you've got an island. It's called Manhattan.
If a group wanted to start a chapter, how is that done? If somebody I know we did here, all of us in Montgomery used to travel to Birmingham, and they
Right.
got so many of us going to Birmingham, we started one. But is there a procedure that they go through?
There is. Jim, you want to take that or you want me?
I'll go ahead and speak to that. If you go to the website, the SBE.org website, you can search under chapters. There's a selection called chapter administration, and there's a handbook there and a variety of forms that we provide to help chapters function. But one of those is a chapter application, and the requirement is that you have 10 members present, and then I think you hold 3 meetings. If I'm remembering correctly, you have to hold 3 meetings, select officers, and then you can submit that chapter application to the national office, and then the board of directors would take action on that, and we would assign a number to you, so you've got an identifier, and then you're really on your own. We don't want to imply that we're controlling what you do. We want the chapters to be locally driven and led, and you decide what subject matter you want to cover with each meeting. Most of them meet once a month, and they settle on a certain date or time that they're going to gather, and then some of them are doing hybrid, like Chris said, hybrid or virtual meetings. But yeah, 10 members is really the application requirement, and submit that to the national office.
Is there a maximum number of meetings they have to have a year, or is it?
No, we do a process, and you'll see it on the website there. We have a rebate for chapter membership dues. So we send money back to the local chapter if they've got enough members and they're meeting. The requirement is 5 meetings a year. If they report to us that they met 5 times a year and present their list of attendees, then we do a calculation and rebate of their membership dues. So they get some money back from the SBE. And typically that'll help underwrite costs like, a Zoom membership or annual picnic that they'll hold face to face and that kind of stuff.
Chris, you had a comment, I think.
No, Jim was hitting on it. I was about to add, but he got it. So
He got it. Something else popped to my mind, and I just, as you get old, things go in one ear and out the other, but I don't remember what it was.
well, while you think about it, if you don't mind, I wouldn't
Yeah.
mind making a quick side note. At the top, you
Sure.
said, Jim is the executive director, Chris does everything else. Well, that's not quite true. I don't want to take credit for that which others have done. I thought it might be worthwhile to mention the others on staff.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to run them down. These happen to be alphabetical by last name, so I'm not taking any preference here. But certification director is Megan Clapp, and obviously she handles everything certification. Also works on awards program and some other things. Debbie Hennessy, our sustaining member manager, also handles a lot of the advertising, well, all the advertising, sponsorship sales, a lot of the accounting. She's a prime contact for our Ennis scholarship applications as well. We didn't even talk about the Ennis scholarships.
True.
Scott Jones, our database manager, handles not only our database, our member records, etc. Handles jobs online, resume service, oversees the dues renewal process, internships, maintains several lists like frequency coordinators and memberships, chapter rosters, things like that. Kathy Oros is education director, which is an all-encompassing and pretty, I think, obvious title, but webinars by SBE, SBE University, Ennis workshops, leadership development course, the SBE Technical Presenters Group, the Technical Professional Training Program, and the Mentor Program. And RJ Russell, who is our frequency coordination manager. And he was brought on primarily as liaison with the work the SBE does with the Department of Defense. The DoD has a series of satellites and some other communication services that we have to cooperate with in the 2 gigahertz spectrum. And RJ is kind of our prime contact to make sure that they're doing what they need to do and we're doing what we need to do and working together and keeping it all happy. But that's RJ's prime function. But he also, like I said, he does a little work on the GRC, the government relations side, as far as being a little bit of an FCC watchdog for us. So,
Yeah.
and then I'll take whatever's left over, I guess.
Oh, okay. That's taking out the garbage. Yeah, you did jar my memory through that, and that was the Ennis Foundation and their workshops. You might, in the closing few minutes, you might say something about that.
I know we've got several scheduled already. We had one earlier in the year, and then we also had the Ennis brand on our pre-conference education event that we had at the NAB show. But we have additional meetings or Ennis workshops happening. I mentioned one in Nashville.
Yeah, I got them here. We had one in El Paso in June, but coming up August 21st in Nashville, September 16th in Jekyll Island, Georgia, and then October 23rd in Kansas City. And I know there's another one being perhaps worked out, let's say up in the New England area. Not to divulge too much yet until they know what they're going to do.
I hope you're not being disturbed by my phone ringing.
So the Ennis Foundation, they actually go around and do technical presentations for.
Yeah, typically an SBE Ennis workshop is about 1 day long, usually a day long event, and it can be done. A local chapter can put it together. State Broadcast Associations sometimes ask us to help them plan a technical program at their conferences or conventions. Topics are, we try to get nuts and bolts topics, not fluff stuff by any means. Hands-on, typically not product specific. We discourage that, so it's the all-encompassing technology. Granted, the presenters may work for a manufacturer, but we make sure they know, okay, just because you work for brand X, let's talk about the technology overall, which may be brand X, Y, and Z. They all do it a little bit differently. And typically the presenters they know what their competition's doing. So they usually can talk to that as well without making it brand specific. Or the last thing we want is, a 45-minute long advertisement. So
Sure. Well, Jim and Chris, I sure appreciate you being with us today. This has been very helpful, very informative. And anybody on the call is not affiliated with or associated with the SBE and would like to become a member, I think it'd be really worth your while and elevate you in your business operation. So thanks again, guys. We enjoyed having you with us.
thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
And just a reminder to everybody, our next, John, you have any closing comments?
No, just to remind everybody, I know that we just had a mention of the Georgia Ennis Foundation meeting coming up. If you go to the gab.org website, you can register there directly, and also SBE. I don't know if the notices have gone out yet, but there'll be notices going out to all the members very shortly, and we all hope to see you there.
All right. Thanks, John. Thanks, Jim and Chris, for being with us. Our next webinar will be on Tuesday, August 15th. You see it there on the screen. So at 10 o'clock Central Time. So make sure to put that in your calendar. And so we'll end it at that and say goodbye and hope to see you in August. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Thanks.
you.